Welcome back to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We're brought to you by Pelican, built tough for all situations. Go to pelican.com. Yak Gadget, for all your fine kayak fishing accessory needs. Go to yakgadget.com. Eastport Marina, on the beautiful shores of Dale Hollow Lake, for all your lodging, kayaking, and fishing needs. Go to eastport.info. Now let's get this show started.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs here on the Paddle and Fin Podcast. I am your host, Sean Lavery, and we're doing take two of this attempt at this recording because the first one got mangled horribly. So I wanted to introduce our guest tonight. He hasn't been on the Paddle and Fin show for a while. He was on the OG show 2 years ago, I think, if I'm doing my math correctly. But this is the first time here on the Bass Fishing for Noobs segment. Welcome, Jameson Redding.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to chat with you some. It's been a minute since I was on the podcast, so I'm glad to be back.
And you sound crystal clear right now, so hopefully that stays that way. For the folks who don't know who you are, or maybe have been new listeners since you've been on, just tell the folks who you are, where you're from, kind of how you got into fishing.
Yeah. So Jameson Redding again, from North Carolina. I live in the foothills here in a little town called Rhonda, which is kind of in between Boone and Winston-Salem, real small town on the banks of the Yadkin River, which is also a real small river. But I grew up here and then moved to Florida for college. And that's kind of when even though I fished when I was a kid, that's kind of when the fishing bug really got a hold of me. I was able to get out and wade some and ended up getting a boat, but it was all inshore. So redfish, speckled trout, that kind of thing. Had a little center console boat. I met my wife and her father fished a lot. So I would always, sneak on the boat with him any chance I could get. But it wasn't until I moved back after college. It's probably been 15, 16 years now that I moved back to my hometown and, had the fishing bug, but couldn't really access the water the same way. The boat was useless here where I live unless I was going to go to a lake or whatever, but there's tons of rivers. I have the New River that's really close. The French Broad's not far. The Yadkin is close. A lot of smaller streams. So my buddies, we would go and try to wade different sections, but access is an issue. Like if you don't have the landowner's permission or you're trying to access from public areas, there's only so much water you could really cover. So we actually started floating some of the rivers in canoes, and eventually we just didn't feel like we were able to have the independence that we wanted. We were, two of us in a canoe at a time. There was three of us. So we were either taking turns or, it just wasn't really working out. So we actually ended up all three buying our first kayaks the same day. And
wow.
We bought Wilderness Systems Tarpon. They bought Tarpon 120, a Tarpon 100, and I ended up getting a Commander 120. It wasn't the right boat for the river. It was a good boat, but it was very open. For those of you that remember the Commander, it was kind of a canoe kayak hybrid. And it would take water over the bow sometimes in some of the rapids of the New River. And a couple of times, if it wasn't for my buddies, that boat might still be sitting on the bottom. That all kind of just led to the passion for kayak fishing and starting to realize access is the big thing. You could just drop in anywhere and really cover a lot more water than what you could do wading or even in a canoe in some scenarios. And also realize that, hey, this boat is very useful outside of just river fishing, lakes, small ponds, or even inshore and offshore. And so we started traveling a little bit, and I started fishing some IFA redfish tournaments just so I could get an excuse to get back to saltwater. Got the rivers here locally, but don't have redfish here, so having that excuse to go do it was cool. And that led me to being on the Jackson team. I ended up getting in the Coosa after I realized the Commander wasn't the right boat for the river. And then I ended up on the Jackson team, and now I'm the brand manager of fishing over at Jackson Kayaks. So fast forward, over the last 12, 13 years of doing it, and still doing it and still in Jackson. So it's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. And that, to be, that long with one brand is pretty impressive in our sport anyway. It seems to people kind of jump around. So when you bleed one company for a long time, that shows something about you, I think, a little bit. So
Well, there's definitely
cool.
time, it's like any relationship, I consider Jackson a family, really, the team and the people that work there. And, sometimes it's dysfunctional family and sometimes everybody's getting along.
Right. There's going to be ebbs and flows for anything, right? So
Yeah.
you can write out the
I can't see
bad
myself
times.
ever going anywhere else for sure.
Cool.
I love the brand, and I love that it's enthusiasts that do it. So whether it's the whitewater guys or the fishing side, we're all users of the product, and we believe in trying to make a product that can help get you out there and do what you want to do. And so that's why I've always stuck with them.
Right. And so that led you to Road Trip Angler. How's that going? Or
Yeah.
what's that like?
So kind of reversing a little bit, a couple of years back or a few years back, and I think you and I talked about this before the show started. I met you on one of these trips, but basically we used to kind of put together this thing. It was actually Brooks, Betty, and I, our idea a little bit, along with James, our marketing director, to go to our dealers and kind of meet up with some of the local team members that we have at Jackson and just, fish their water and experience what that area had to offer, whether it was the food, the dealer, the people that lived in the area and the fisheries, and capture all that through the lens of both photo and video, and kind of come back with the experiences and getting to meet and hang out with everybody, but also then telling that story and trying to put some great content out that our dealer could share, the people that were on the trip could share, and Jackson could share. So we did that for a few years, and it was on one of those trips to Shanks Mare, as you mentioned earlier, before we started the podcast, where we were fishing the Susquehanna and kind of did this tour of Pennsylvania, but chasing all river fishing. Actually, we hooked up with a couple of dealers there, and it was just a really good time. I had never fished the Susky before, but that's kind of what led to the Road Trip Angler project. So fast forward, we went through some ups and downs at Jackson as far as financially, and then we're back good now and kind of restructured a lot of how we do things as a brand. And we wanted to get back to that, visiting the dealers and hanging out with the team members and really just like showcasing the community, the kayak fishing community and the different regions across the country. And so the idea for Road Trip Angler kind of spawned from that. And it was basically, hey, I'll go, and now we're going to bring a camera crew, a production crew along with us. And I'm just kind of connecting the dots, if you will, like introducing the locals, introducing the shop, and exploring the different regions. So it's off to a good start. We filmed a couple of locations. We've got 3 more locations to go for the first season. And then sometime this summer, that will be airing on what used to be Fox Sports. It's now called Bali Sports. So they have regional networks across the country, and it'll air on all of those regional networks. And then we'll also put out digital content through Jackson's YouTube channel and through my Instagram and Facebook and whatnot. So it's been a lot of fun so far, and I'm looking forward to the next few episodes for sure.
That sounds like an awesome way to, kind of travel around and see new spots, learn new places, plus get, keep in contact with your dealers. Cause I know Devin at Shanks Mare talks highly of you guys and, the relationship he has with Jackson. That's actually where I got my Coos HD. I bought it from there. And I think the time that I just happened to run into you, I stopped by and I was like, Devin, whose trailer is that outside? He's always like, oh, that's Jameson Redding. And he's in that camper out there if you want to go meet him. So
it's pretty much living in his parking lot.
Yeah. We walked out, knocked on the door of the camper, and he's like, yeah, this is Jameson Redding. I was like, holy cow. So
nothing's really changed, man. Like still, like I love that aspect of, and that's actually like what I said earlier, like realizing that you could take a kayak anywhere. You can't, there's not really a boat out there. So like if you're a bass fisherman, you get a bass boat, you can't take that and run parts of the Susquehanna, right? Like I'm not going to take that and go down to Louisiana and chase redfish in it. It's just not the right tool. But you mentioned the Coosa HD. I can take that boat offshore. I can take it inshore. I can take it down a river, and it all fits in the bed of my pickup. So that's same thing. And that just being able to go and explore new areas and new waterways, I think is one of the coolest things about kayak fishing.
It's really kind of a universal tool. It pretty much can do most things pretty well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. So, I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on tonight is, I obviously live right by the Susquehanna, so river fishing is huge for me. I used to be super intimidated by it, and I've, once I got out there and realized, A, how many fish I could catch, and, B, really, just got to learn my area of the Susquehanna there. And realized, it really is, pretty navigable and nothing to be too crazy about as long as you're smart about it. And, I always take a peek at the flow rates and stuff like that and make sure it's safe. But, as long as I do that, it's a magical place for me. So,
For sure.
and I know, and it was the weirdest thing for me because I just took for granted when I hear people talking about river fishing that they mean a huge mile-wide river. And it wasn't until my old co-host and I were talking about, well, I was like, well, how wide bank to bank is the river that you fish regularly? He's like, maybe 100 yards, maybe at the widest. And I was like, holy crap. And then it just hit me and I was like, you know what? Holy cow, that, we're talking about, even though we're both talking about fishing rivers, we're really talking about two entirely different things. So.
Oh yeah. The first time when we came up, it was Brooks and I think it might've been his first time on the Susquehanna as well. And, the first day that we accessed the water, a friend of ours dropped a pin. Russell Johnson dropped a pin for us on a spot that he liked to fish. Well, I don't know if we realized it. Maybe we did. I'm pretty sure we looked at Google Earth, but there was an island or maybe two islands kind of splitting the river up. So we were able to kind of look at it as just like a smaller river the way we're used to fishing here. And the next day we went to that area, and I cannot remember the name of it, but there's the iconic Statue of Liberty out in the middle.
Yep.
And we got out of the truck there, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to do, man. Like, because it was just so overwhelming how many, rock ledges and the water, how it was flowing. And I was just like, man, are there fish all the way across this? Are they concentrating in one area? Like, it was just a new challenge for me to try to break down a river that was that wide, and try to figure out where to fish. When I'm used to, like you said, like the 100-yard, some of the areas are even more narrow. Like, we fish some stuff that arguably may not even be navigable by kayak, and we just use the kayak to get from shoal to shoal and then get out and wade and drag the boat in a lot of places. So it does range. Like, river fishing can be totally different things depending on the river you're talking about, and even what type of species that you're chasing.
Okay. Is there, if there's a similarity to it, would it be that you're targeting moving water, current breaks, that kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. And even inshore, man, that's why I think I like inshore and river fishing are kind of my two top things. It's all current based, and I'm sure it is to some extent on lakes. I've heard people talk about when they start releasing water and it starts to draw a current, that it turns the bite on. But you've got that constantly in a river. And for me, again, like, it was here on the New River and the early stages of the New River. We have the North and South Fork of the New, and where they come together here locally close to where I live. So very small, and then they get a little bigger, but that river continues to grow as it goes. And so I'm fishing the beginning of some of that water. And when I look at it, it depends on, I think, the time of year, obviously, and what we're doing right now. We're starting to see a transition where the fish are becoming a little more active, and we'll start moving from their winter holes into what I really like to fish, which is when they're kind of that. I guess it'd be pre-spawn, and they're feeding up, and they're just aggressive, and they're moving into more of the swifter, higher oxygenated water. And and they'll just smack a chatterbait or, whatever. And so I'm looking forward to those months. And it's interesting to me how it is. We have a river south of us in South Carolina called the Broad, and the Broad has smallmouth in it. And it turns on really, really good, usually about a month before the new does in Virginia. So it's always interesting to see how it starts to turn on, and then you kind of like finish up there and then move over to the new. But I'm not saying you can't catch fish on the new right now, because like my buddy Timmy Dixon, who lives on the new, has been slaying some 20s the last couple of days.
Wow.
So yeah, he's been getting the big girls to bite. But he's slow rolling it. Looks like he's slow rolling some chatterbaits and some crankbaits, and kind of around their wintering holes. So they're starting to get active and starting to move, and it's starting to get exciting for sure.
Yeah, that's always a fun time when it just starts to get warm enough and you start, picking them off, and you're not having to do those super slow winter presentations or, like hair jigs or jerk baits as much. I mean, jerk baits are fun, but so, okay, cool. So you kind of target moving water, and I know I take for granted too, even structure like and cover, on Susquehanna, it's rocky ledges and a lot of rock, but a lot of rivers, it's more down trees and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I think that's when it kind of comes into play too. So like here, we're kind of lucky. We're in that zone where we have largemouth, smallmouth, and some of our rivers even have spotted bass in them. So it's interesting because you can tell, like, I don't know if you've spent a lot of time catching, different, like multiple species in the same river, but you can always almost tell what you have on while you're fighting it.
Right.
You're like, okay, I don't think this is a smallmouth. This is coming up to jump or whatever. You start to figure that out. But it's also interesting to see, and I mentioned the Broad earlier. There are some areas that do have both largemouth and smallmouth, but they'll be even remote, just slightly different what they're holding to. And then as you break the river down a little bit bigger, it's even more so like that. So I always kind of say that the water between smallmouth waters is usually largemouth water or spotted bass water. And then as you move into the more swifter current, the highly oxygenated stuff where you've got some rock ledges and you've actually got maybe some mild rapids or whatever, that tends to be more like the smallmouth water. Now I'm talking about in the spring when the fish are feeding, not wintertime holes or anything, but
right.
So I think it depends on what you're targeting and what your river holds. If you have a river with a lot of rocks and stuff and you have smallmouth, then you definitely want to be targeting the rocks and the lee side. Usually I like to personally face upriver as much as possible and cast upriver and bring my bait downriver. So I'll set up not in the eddies. And for those that don't know what I mean when I say an eddy, it's basically you've got all the current coming downriver, and let's say you have a boulder or something in the middle that's creating a current break, and that current break behind the boulder is going to be your eddy where the water kind of swirls, and sometimes it'll even flow back up towards the rock. So what's happening is any kind of bait or food that's coming down, those fish usually will face up current and sit on those seams where the swift water and the slack water kind of meet when they're feeding aggressively. So I like to cast upriver, maybe even, above the boulder or whatever, and then have it come down and just kind of rip into that seam or even all the way into that eddy and kind of work it as many different ways and angles as possible. And a lot of times that's where, when they're being aggressive and they're feeding, that's where they're going to hang out. The same thing can be said about largemouth. They're going to be in slower water, likely holding to wood, sometimes rock, but a lot more wood usually involved there. So you got down trees and whatnot, but the same kind of thing. They're going to be in the little current breaks on the edges and stuff. Even though it's less current, they're still current. So you're just applying that on a different scale.
Interesting. And I'm thinking about what you're saying about casting above the boulder and letting it come down maybe across that boulder and then into the current seam and into the eddy. What kind of lures are you doing that works by? Like a lot of times when I was fishing, what I've gotten comfortable with is kind of sitting at the tail end of the eddy, and casting up right behind that rock. But you're saying cast further than that and let it come through.
Sometimes like even if you have a ledge and you've got the water kind of pushing up to that ledge upstream, the fish will sit up there as well. So I like to bring the bait over the ledge and then into the pool. A lot of times a fish will literally sit in that white water, like if you got a small waterfall or rapid, they'll sit right up in there in that white water. So then you can bring it. So, I mean, you kind of want to try everything. As far as types of lures, man, it really does change throughout the season. But if the fish are up there and they're in that kind of zone feeding, then I love throwing a chatterbait. It's my favorite bait to throw. I joke if they're not eating it, I'm like, well, they're not biting today, but that doesn't mean they're not biting. But it's like I just love throwing it, and so that's one of my go-tos. Another one, if you can get a good topwater coming across, and this is more in the seams. It's hard to work a topwater in the swifter stuff, but I'll definitely throw some spooks and stuff like that when the bite does start to turn on. It's a little early for that right now. In my water for smallmouth, especially here. But as we move into the spring a little bit more and they're aggressive, definitely topwater baits, Z-Man, pop shads, those you can't beat a spook. I mean, a spook junior. Always have something like a streaks or a fluke type bait that I can just kind of work either weightless or just slightly weighted, so that if they do hit the top water a miss, I'll always kind of set that down and follow up with that soft plastic that's going to ride just below the surface. And a lot of times you'll entice that bite, and actually hook the fish if they slash at the top water and miss it. So I like having something like that ready to go. But yeah, I throw a chatterbait a lot. But spinnerbait works great too. And I think when I first started fishing smallmouth, in my head, I thought, okay, largemouth will eat the bigger baits. They got a bigger mouth. Smallmouth are going to want smaller baits because they have a smaller mouth. So, like, literally, when I first started doing this in the kayak, I was throwing like rooster tails and stuff.
Yeah.
And catching a lot of fish, but a lot of small fish. Occasionally get a decent one. And I think one time we were goofing off and we caught like call them red eye, but it's a little rock bass, like a small, about the size of my hand. And my buddy's like, well, I'm going to put that down as a live bait and see if I can't catch a muskie on it. And so you can do that here. If you catch them hook and line, you can actually use like a brim or whatever as bait. So he hooks it through the nose and sends it out to catch a muskie, right? And we're like, yeah, whatever. And the rod goes off. And so he's fighting this fish, and turns out it's like an 18.5-inch smallmouth that has choked this, hand size, fish down its throat. And so light bulb, right? Like, we're throwing too small of stuff. Like, these guys are aggressive and they're going to eat like bigger baits. And so now I'm throwing like a 1/2-ounce jackhammer with a 5-inch diesel minnow as a trailer, and still just catching, 16, 17-inch fish on that. I mean, they're aggressive fish. And when they're feeding in that swifter water, don't be afraid to throw bigger baits at them. Like that, big baits do catch bigger fish sometimes. And so I'll do that a lot.
It's funny that you say that, because my first confidence bait on the river was a rooster tail. And
it catches everything.
It really did. I mean, I was catching catfish and everything, but it was just easy to do, and I seemed to have good luck on it. And it wasn't until like kind of last year that I was like, you know what, I'm just going to graduate up a little bit. And I started doing, crankbaits and, rattle traps and stuff, and realized that the quality of fish that I was catching did definitely go up.
Yeah, for sure. You start to weed out some of the smaller guys. But talking about crankbaits, that's another great one. I kind of use the crankbait as like, say, right before the fish have kind of moved into that real aggressive topwater / chatterbait pattern. Like right now is when I'm starting to throw crankbaits and stuff. It gets down a little deeper. You want it to kind of divert off the rocks, but you can kind of move into those not quite as shallow and fast moving pools, but you still have current and you've got a little bit deeper water. It's a great way to kind of find those fish as they start to transition. And it works in the fall as as well. So, that October time frame for us down here, and I'm even up there, you guys have pretty aggressive fish in October up there. But as you start to move into those like little bit cooler mornings and whatnot, the crankbait, and just going with one that is going to run deep enough to bounce off stuff. You want it in the rock. Not the whole time, but like you want it to definitely hit, like be skimming the surface so it diverts and stuff. Because a lot of times when it does that hit and diverts off of it, that's when they're going to take it. But yeah, that's another go-to for sure.
My PB Smalley I got last October. It was either October or the very beginning of November. It was 20 and a quarter, and it came on a rattle trap. So, but I had been throwing the square bill all summer and having real good luck on it too. So I definitely see the place for both. And what I really like the crank or the square bill for coming across ripples and stuff where, because it just doesn't hang up that much, where it's pretty much everything else I would throw in those ripples would, I'd get snagged and have to kind of go right in there and mess it all up, get my bait back. Yeah. So
I may or may not have snuck out this afternoon to go fishing for a little bit, and the square bill was on for me today.
Nice.
It was all largemouth today, but yeah, they definitely were hitting it. I did get a couple to eat the chatterbait because I can't help it. I've got to throw it, and I got a couple to take a spinnerbait too. But the majority of my fish were on a square bill today for sure.
And what's your water temperatures down there right now?
You know what? I didn't even check it. So where I went today was a warmer area. And I waited till the evening. Today we got up into the almost 70 degrees air temp wise. So I would say the water temp was in the high 50s, maybe pushing low 60s. But that's because of the river that I was in. Like it's not that warm on the New where the smallmouth are hanging out. So, but that's why I was able to get away with. And I fished around a lot of rock riffraff that was heating up with the sun. And that's where the crankbait was getting it done, was where that late afternoon and the sun had been shining on that rock all day, and it had the fish turned on for sure.
Nice.
But I didn't check I didn't even have a fish finder on the boat today. So I just, I was just throwing stuff and found one that worked.
Nice. I was out on Sunday, and it was our water temperatures. The warmest I saw was just over 40. So
yeah,
we're still pretty cold, but I'm looking forward to it. And then we're like today we got up to like low 50s, and we're supposed to see the 60s tomorrow. So it should be starting to warm up here finally, I think, breaking out of that cold spell. But I was curious, when you say you're throwing the chatterbait up past that, if it's coming with the current, how do you keep up with it? Like, how do you?
Well, so, your reel has some to do with that. And also I think the weight, I throw a half ounce a lot. I know a lot of guys will throw the 3/8. But the half is I feel like you can get it down a little bit better so that it's not going to skim the surface. You're not having to like burn it, or if you are burning it, it's not going to jump up top as easy. But yeah, again, so like I will try to like cross the current at an angle. So like maybe like a 45 or so. So I'm not always just throwing directly upstream and bringing it directly back down. I'm trying to like cross those seams. So if you have like a shelf where you've got multiple places where you've got kind of a chute, you can throw it up in one and then kind of bring it out of that into the seam and into the eddy.
Gotcha.
And then, but again, man, sometimes there's no they could be anywhere. Like, so I just fan cast the crap out of just about every ledge. And that's what did make it a little bit difficult for me fishing up there on the Susquehanna, was I wanted to throw at everything. And being the only time or the first time that I had been on a lot of that water, not knowing what pockets are just a little bit deeper or, a little bit shallower or whatever. But we were able to figure it out. We hit one section that had bigger ledges with deeper water below it. And that fish, I mean, it was very much the same as what we see here when we were on that. And then we could even see the fish like following, when we'd hook one, another one would be like, following it. So, always following up with another like bait, and even putting that fish on fish grips while you do that is a great way to like I guess, really take advantage of a hole that's got multiple fish in it. So you're not letting one go back in it, while you're sitting there trying to pull more out. But yeah, if you've got, so like I will fish a faster speed, like at least a 7-to-1, but like I've got one that's an 8-to-1, I believe, on one of my reels, just so I can keep up with it. And it's really more so like I'll slow roll it, I will slow down my reels as I'm reeling until I know that the bait is like kicking, and you can feel it usually on the rod tip, right? So as long as that thing's chattering, I'm good. And if I need to speed up, I have the ratio to do so, to be able to get it through that current. But the bigger, they swim pretty good, man. Like you'd have to be in pretty swift water not to be able to get it to thump a little. And having that bigger 5-inch diesel minnow as a trailer on there definitely gives it some kick.
Cool. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I've heard the 45 thing, so I was curious if that's what 45-degree angle a lot. And again, that's something I tend to employ too, because I feel like, if you can make a longer cast, you can cover a little bit more water. Whereas if you're just sitting trying to shoot directly above the the break and just bring it back down through, makes a lot of sense. I don't know if where you fished on the Susquehanna had much grass, but kind of down where I fish, there are pretty big patches of grass, and that's where I really go for the weightless fluke and stuff, because it's something I can kind of just let lay on the very tops of that grass and get hammered that way too.
Yeah, for sure. Some of the areas I did fish had that grass, and that is another reason I like the chatterbait, is it does a better job getting through that than some of the other baits do. And they even make some weedless versions of the chatterbait. I throw a jackhammer a lot, but yeah, it will definitely it does pretty well in the grass, as long as it's not that snot grass, right? Like as long as it's just real grass, like it'll come through it pretty good. And it's very popular bait that people use like on the Delta and stuff a lot, where you have a lot of grass.
No, and I heard that, and we have a kind of a mixture. We do have some of the snotty grass, which is
that
really
stuff is
obnoxious, and that stuff drove me crazy the first time I started fishing that. I was like, what the heck comes through this without getting all where you're cleaning off every time you come back. But
not a crankbait.
No, definitely not. And but oddly enough, the fish do kind of hang in there sometimes, but
yeah, I noticed that like we don't, on the new where I fish, we don't have a lot of that. It's definitely more rock, boulders, that kind of stuff. Some trees that are down and whatnot, but the smallmouth in the spring for sure, and in the fall are going to hold more to the swift, like closer to the ledges and the riffles and rapids or whatnot. But when I was up there, I did a float. I'm trying to think of when we were up there. The Take 2 had just came out, the Jackson Take 2, and I went up there and fished with Josh Evans, and we floated pretty good amount. I mean, like I think we did like 4 or 5 miles, and there were a lot of fish. It was different for me to fish smallmouth in that grass and around that grass. Like they were around like the islands in the middle of the river, and there would be grass flats kind of coming in those eddies on the backside of some of those islands. And so it was interesting to me to catch smallmouth in what looked like a largemouth spot to me. Like I would have thought that's a largemouth spot, but I guess when you have tons of smallmouth like you guys do, it's a smallmouth spot.
Yeah, no, and all the I think why I fished the river for a lot, and I think I've only ever caught 2 largemouth on the river.
Yes, I don't think it's there's some, we have some on the new here, but like the Yakin River, for example, which is closer to my house here, it's used to be a lot kind of, I would say, more smallmouth. Now it's spotted bass. Like it's just spotted bass have taken it over. But so yeah, it's definitely heavy. But I think a river fish in general, like I'm not a big largemouth guy. Like I love smallmouth. When it comes to largemouth in a lake, like I'll do it, but if I got my choice, I'm going smallmouth river fishing, right?
Yes.
But even in a river, largemouth are a different animal. Like they fight way harder, and the fact that they're in that current, yeah, I'll take it.
Right.
But
Pretty
I'm
much,
definitely a river guy.
every fish that I've caught on the river, for the most part, has put up more fight than any lake fish I've ever caught.
Yeah, and some of it may be the current, but I don't care. Like, it still feels better on the
Yeah.
rod, right?
No, I agree with you, man, 100%. But I thought of a question there, and it just totally slipped my mind. What was I gonna think? What was I gonna ask? It's gone. I know what I was gonna ask you. When you're positioning, are you usually just like, how are you holding your position? Are you anchoring, or are you just paddling to keep up, or pedaling, or?
Sorry, my GoPro just started beeping at me. I had a GoPro laying here on the table and it started beeping at me. But anyway, so yeah, I've tried a little bit of everything. I ran a drag chain for a long time, and I still think that it can be very useful. But the only issue I really kind of have with the drag chain is I end up facing downriver, and I really want to
Yep,
fish
I was just gonna
upriver.
say that.
So I played around with some different things, and some of the places that I fish, you can literally just like wade a lot of it. So I've done this on the Susquehanna a couple times as well when we were up there. Was like put the boat. Definitely do this when it's a little warmer, or have the right gear on when you're going to do it. But put the boat like up on a rock or a ledge, get out and kind of wade and fish it that way, and that works really well when you do have the more shallow or more exposed rocks that you can get out and walk around on. Don't think of the kayak as being like I have to fish from the kayak. The kayak can get you to a lot of places, and then you can still get out and walk around and fish the water and really work it, and then keep all your gear in the kayak. And I've even drugged the kayak like probably a mile behind me, like it floating most of the time, right? But I've got a strap or whatever around my waist and just kind of walking and working the water that way when you do have shallower, like knee deep type water that the fish are holding in. But what I found to work really well recently is I've taken one of the anchor wizards and mounted it off the bow. So I've got the pulley, or the whatever, the real part of the anchor wizard mounted kind of at my hip. And then I run the line down the side and off the bow with their I don't know what you call it, their deployment system
The
or
shoot
whatever.
thingy.
Yeah. And so that works really well. And I don't like using a claw anchor in a river because, you don't want to get anchored in a river in general is something you really want to be prepared to cut your line in case something goes down. So I always tell people I keep a knife right here on my chest on my PFD.
As
So
do
that,
I. Yep.
yeah, I mean, because you don't want to be in swift water and that anchor get hung up, but it can be a very valuable tool. So that, like, you can buy the like round ball type anchors and they won't catch up as bad. I actually have a friend that kind of made me one out of a solid piece of metal, and then he welded like a half of a giant flat washer on the top of it. So it's just a cylinder. I've seen people use window weights, like the old timey window weights.
Oh yeah.
So anything like that works, or just you can even do the drag chain, but do it off the bow. And that could work too. If you are floating though, obviously keep an eye out behind you. But all those things work really well to kind of hold your position, because the last thing you want to do is come down the current and then pill out into the eddy where you should be fishing. Right now you're sitting where you should be fishing, and the current's going to naturally want to take you all the way back up to that boulder or rock ledge, and just cycle you around like it's going to do the food that it's literally bringing to the fish. So like, you want to kind of pill out later, like come down the rapid or the chute or whatever, and keep paddling, and then circle back at the tail end, but then work your way back up. The fish aren't always all the way up at the ledge. A lot of times they'll be at the very bottom of the eddy, or the seam. So slowly kind of make a few casts and a few paddle strokes and just work your way up. And then if you need to anchor, you want to anchor where the current's still kind of pushing you down, and cast into the eddy so that you're not going to like float back up river in the current where it's swirling.
Right.
So,
I've been watching a lot of Jeff Little, and he really breaks down fishing.
Yeah, that dude is
the
the
three
river
different
fisher.
parts of the eddy. Fishing
Yep.
right behind the structure, then kind of the mid, and then the tail where it tails out. And
Yep.
he talks about so many times people sit right over the fish they should be fishing for, and I know that I've done that a lot after watching his videos, and so I'm really kind of looking forward to getting out there this year.
Yeah, it definitely opens it up when you realize like that there's, like he said, I mean, and Jeff, I've learned a lot from him. I mean, him and I are good friends, and before I even knew him, I would watch some of his DVDs and just like, oh, this guy's like, he has more, like he's forgotten more stuff than I'll ever know. And I don't know if I'll ever have the level of commitment to really trying to understand every in and out of a smallmouth bass, but that dude is committed. Like he'll, he goes out there when it's like ice, freezing rain, blowing sideways, whatever, like, and he's still catching 21-inch, 22-inch smallmouth. I'm like, yeah, I won't be doing that. So I won't be catching those fish, but yeah, he's right. And a lot of that I learned, through other people, but then just, accidentally sometimes, you're like, you make a random cast, you're like, whoa, there's a fish there.
Right.
And you start to realize, and it honestly is the same. If you're fishing the same species and the water looks similar to, at all, like if there's rock bottom and boulders and current breaks and all that, and you're fishing smallmouth and it's similar temperatures, and then food source and that kind of thing, like it's gonna, like, fish it the same way you would your home river. If you're traveling somewhere, like start there and like you'll figure it out. Like it may take you a minute to kind of break it down and start to develop a pattern on a new river, but they're the same fish, like they eat the same stuff. So
right.
It's just then dialing in the time of year and where they're located. The nice thing about a river is, if you're putting in and taking out, like they're going to be somewhere in there. Like it's not like a lake where you've got acres and acres and acres of 60-foot deep water in some places. And I mean, like, I don't know how anyone breaks a lake down, to be honest with you. But.
Yeah, no. I've had people, say that about the Susquehanna, but I'm like, hey, at least there's visible stuff that you can look at, and see. Yeah, I think fish are going to be there. Whereas when I go to a lake, like you're saying, where I was just at one on Sunday, and like I'm looking at my depth finder, and I'm like, oh, now it's 40, now it's 50, and I'm like, it looks like it should be 10, but
and you mark fish, and then you drop something down to them when they don't eat. But then like 2 hours later they'll eat. Like I don't. It's I'm much more enjoy river fishing because even if you're not catching fish, you're still kayaking a river, right? Like
oh yeah, and the part of the Susquehanna we're at, I mean, I see bald eagles regularly. I've seen deer swimming across in front of me. The amount of awesome stuff there is to see, it's just amazing. But
you mentioned something earlier, and I'd kind of like to touch on it. You talked about being intimidated, by the river. And I think that's where it helped us having a couple of buddies, but we learned a lot of things the hard way. Flipping kayaks, losing rods, breaking rods, sinking kayaks. Like we did a lot of dumb stuff, and the information is out there now a lot more than it probably was then. I just didn't know to look or where to find it. But if any of your listeners have not fished a river or haven't gotten into a kayak yet, or they're just getting into kayak fishing, I would say do yourself a favor and go out on flat, calm water and learn some things. It's invaluable to go out and flip your boat on purpose. And then learn what it takes to get it right side up, get back in it, and do it with like figure out what you need to do to keep your gear from going down the river, and don't losing your paddle. Make sure you got a life jacket that's fitted properly. Like you're dealing with moving water this time of year. As the days get warmer, the water, like you said, your water's still in the 40s, and I guarantee you, I don't know this, but the new is probably maybe 50 or in the low 50s. And even if it's 60, 70 degrees outside, like you can't spend a lot of time in water that cool. and not get, hypothermia. So there's definitely a lot of things that, you do want to take into consideration. It's not to be intimidating. It's more just so that it doesn't have to be intimidating. Like, you can be prepared to go in the water, always be prepared to swim, because it could happen to anybody at any time. And then just know, like, what you need to do to get yourself, back to safety in your boat, and that kind of thing. And I think going out on some flat water and spending some time and learning the kayak, and like I said, like literally turning over on purpose and see what it takes to get back in. And a lot of resources out there, and all those things are just going to like allow you to be more comfortable while you're out on the water and not be intimidated. And the other thing I would say about river fishing, it's all about boat position. It is 100% about not sitting over top of the fish that you're trying to catch, about running the rapid the right way, or, like being able to face upriver, like you said, how do I hold that position? So I think it's also do yourself a favor. And again, there's lots of videos out there, but learn a few paddle strokes. Become an actual kayaker, like it's kayak fishing. And I know a lot of other anglers have said this, like kayaking is half of, like, if you can kayak, then you're going to be a better kayak fisherman, because you know how to position your boat. You know some strokes that will allow you to kind of walk your boat sideways or whatever, and get it where it needs to be, and how to keep your paddle kind of in your lap and ready to go. Pedals on the types of rivers that I fish, and even on the Susquehanna, are going to be in some areas kind of useless, right? So like learning to paddle properly and how to maneuver the boat properly is going to help you position it so that you can catch more fish, and be in the right place at the right time. So there's some things there that I would encourage everybody to like learn some safety stuff and really like dive into some paddle technique. You'll be more comfortable, you'll be less tired, and you'll be able to position the boat better to catch more fish.
Absolutely. I was lucky enough, Shanksmere, my local paddle shop, they offer classes. So eventually I took their classes, and that, they go through everything from, writing yourself. They do paddle strokes. They teach all sorts of stuff like that. So my level of comfort went way up past that. And I think you're 100% right. Like when I got my Kusa, I went out empty and with the intent of flipping it. And I think it's really important that you kind of lean and see, so you can, find that secondary stability and find where your point of no return is, so
Yep.
when you're out on the water and, you start leaning for a fish or leaning to pull get a snag out or something like that, how far you can go.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and it definitely just knowing you can get back in is a huge thing. And don't take for granted that you can, because, depending on the situation, it can be definitely tough.
And you add super cool water or cold air temps or whatever to that, or, you hit your knee on the way down, like anything can happen. And I remember we were floating the river in South Carolina, the Broad, with a guy who said he was a kayak fisherman, and he had kayak fished. He had a Hobie Pro Angler, but he had never river fished, and he got one of those situations where the boat's going over a ledge, but the back end hangs up, right? So now you're teetering on the bow and the back end, and he went in, and it was a warm day, man. It was like probably 65 to 70 degrees during the day. But the water temps were still pretty cool, and it started to get dark. So the air temp dropped, like, I want to say it was November, but the air temp just went from like really nice during the day to like 40s as soon as the sun started going down. And that dude got hypothermia on us. Like, he could not, like, he had no function. He couldn't get back in the boat. He's wearing one of those inflatable like life jackets, which I do wear those, especially like on flat water or inshore where it's shallow, but I do not wear those in a river. Some of the ones like the NRS ones do a lot better job. So if they do inflate, they're not like super uncomfortable, but like some of the other ones, the old school ones that you like carry around on your bass boat or whatever, like those things go off, man. Now you're like getting choked by your, then that's the one he had, right? Like, it was like there's no way he could wear it comfortably the rest of the trip. So like he was pretty much like trying to deflate it, which now it's useless, right? It's been been set off, and it's not going to do any good. But yeah, he just wasn't prepared. Like, he didn't have the right clothing, he didn't have the right life jacket, and he just didn't know what to do. And so we had to like build a fire and get him like undressed and warm, and it could have been bad. Like, he couldn't stand up on his own once we got to the takeout. And it was such a small thing. Like, I mean, the water was knee deep that he fell out in,
Right.
and he stood up, right? Like, but he got wet head to toe. And then we still had quite a bit of river to go before the takeout. And we didn't have clothes, and it got dark, and he got cold. And luckily we got him warm, and he got all right. But yeah, he was like straight up, lost function to his limbs. And it got real close to being a hospital trip for sure.
Right. And they talk a lot about in the classes that Shanks Mayer teaches, and I've heard other people say, is that, if you respect the river and the power that it has, you'll be okay as long as you're not being foolish. Like they talk about the 120 rule, where if the water temperature and air temperature don't add up to 120, then you probably should have some form of warmth on beyond just regular clothes, whether that's a dry suit or some kind of wetsuit. But and so I bit the bullet and bought a dry suit just so I could extend my season safely.
Yeah, exactly. Like and that's the key right there. Like what you just said. You have no problem spending the money on baits and tackle and rod and reel combos. Like, if you can extend the season, and you look at what Jeff's catching in the wintertime, like if you can extend your season safely, river fishing, like it's going to produce some of the best memories like of your life. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely. It's just so awesome, dude. Like, I love it.
I was going to ask you, so now you've obviously you've paddled. I don't know, do you motor at all?
I do. And that was the other thing I was going to bring up in what you were talking about, the positioning. Some areas, some of the rivers, like I said, that we fish are just super shallow. And a lot of times we're dragging boats. But I've been with Torqeedo for years, and I've had like their ultralight 403 from way back. And now I have the 1103. And in your river specifically, and some of the rivers around here, like it can be a very valuable tool. Like it allows you to launch in one spot, go upriver, fish your way upriver, which now you've not even floated across any of that water, and hold position in current, using your feet to steer or whatever. So like it kind of blew me away and I never really thought about it as a river, thing until more recently, just because, like I said, a lot of the rivers around here, you really couldn't use it as much. But now I'm actually seeing that you probably could have. I just assumed you couldn't, right? Like I've got the rock guard on there, and that makes a huge difference. And yeah, it really changes how you even access, because if you're able to go upriver now quite a ways and fish, you don't need that like second truck or to run a shuttle or any of that stuff. So if you can afford it, you don't need it for sure. Like you can totally fish a river without a motor. Did it for years, and a lot of people do. But there's a lot of options out there now. I'm partial to Torqeedo. I think they make a great product and they stand by it. But even a trolling motor could probably get you into some stuff that and really, again, extend. And there's purists that are like, well, that's not kayak fishing. Well, I got into kayak fishing because I wanted to access water. Like it was the right tool to put me on fish.
Right.
So if adding a motor to my kayak is the right tool to get me to where I need to go to catch fish, then I'm all for it. Like we'll put a 250 on the back if we can get on. So
I think that's going to probably be one of my next major investments. I did the paddle thing to start, and now I pedal, and I think just seeing how much further I can get with pedal versus paddle, I think adding a motor, just I can, right off the top of my head, I can think of places right by me that I could get to that I even if I could get there pedaling, but I'm going to be so wiped out from getting up there.
Right.
That it's going to be just not enjoyable. So
but the cool thing about the motor especially if you can add the foot steering over, when you're pedaling, you still kind of have to have your hand on that rudder.
Right.
But now your feet control kind of the rudder, if you will, with the motor. So yeah, you have to control the throttle, but a lot of times you can kind of find that sweet spot and keep your hands a lot more free for fishing. And that's what I've been doing. Actually, what I was doing today, I had the Torpedo and was ripping around. I left my anchor in the car, and I kind of regretted that. There was a couple of times where, I was like going back and forth, holding with the motor, but I would like to have just dropped anchor once I got there and really worked an area a little bit better. But yeah, I would say, and it depends. Like I said, it depends on your waterways. I've got areas here that I still wouldn't probably take the motor, and I'm going to take the lightest boat I have. I have a Jackson Kilroy right now as kind of my like drag around. Pull behind me up the river in certain areas where the motor just wouldn't make as much sense, especially once I got there. Like it might help me get there, but then once I'm getting out of the kayak and dragging it, now I've just got extra weight that I don't really need, right?
Right.
So it just depends on where you're at and what you're doing, but it can be a great tool for sure.
And I know like the Susquehanna can change. One week I'll go out and it'll be a foot deep, and I'm like you said, I'm getting out and walking. I'm definitely not pedaling very much. I'm more, paddling what I can and then, waiting the rest. But then, we can have a couple of days of rain, and then all of a sudden that spot's now 5 foot and I can pedal through it, and would be able to motor around a little bit better. So I like I said, I definitely think it's on the horizon. I have some convincing with the wave to do, but it's definitely something probably in the not too distant future for me. So
yeah, well, the cool thing is they're pretty simple to take on and off, and if you upgrade your kayak down the road, you can always swap that out. So
bring it with you, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to help sell it for your wife.
all right, honey, are you listening? No. So awesome, dude. Well, I gave us a bunch of good information, I think, and definitely a place to start. So, for all the listeners out there who, might be a little bit, intimidated by hopping on the river, just do your research. Find somebody in your local area who, to go out with. I think that helped me a lot too, is, going out with some people who kind of knew what they were doing and could kind of point me in the right direction. Check 100%. Out your local paddle sports dealers, check for classes and stuff. That made a big difference for me as well. But yeah, make sure you get out and just enjoy it. Cause it really, I was really amazed at, the quality of fish and quantity of fish that I caught once I got comfortable, and now I wouldn't trade it for the world. So
yeah, it'll definitely ruin you for sure. And I mean, like you said, I think it's always good to go if you're river fishing to try to find somebody to go with, that knows, because you'll learn so much, man, just in one trip with somebody that's done it. And the cool thing about the kayak fishing community is everyone's always like pretty open to sharing stuff with you. And, they might not share their favorite bait or their exact hole within the hole, but man, for the most part, kayak fishing community is just awesome. So like, don't be intimidated to ask people to go out and to help you learn or share a location with you or whatever. So
awesome, dude. Well, I wanted to give you a chance to shout out A, where folks can find you, and then B, your sponsors and everybody. I know Jackson, obviously, and it sounds like Torpedo and a couple others.
Yeah, so you definitely follow me at Jameson Redding on Instagram, Jameson Redding Fishing on Facebook. Again, we're going to be launching a lot of the content for the show on Jackson Kayaks YouTube channel and on their platforms as well. So give them a follow on Jackson Kayak Fishing on Facebook and Instagram. And then, I am blessed to have quite a few sponsors that I get to work with, and Team Rain Shadow that I got on the hats. My rod sponsor, NRS, makes a lot of great gear for what we were talking about, cold weather gear and safety equipment, PFDs. So definitely check them out. Jackson Kayak. I could go through them: Cigar, Bending Branches, Torpedo, Wiley X sunglasses. I'm going to leave someone out and feel really bad about it. But yeah, I've lucky, like I said, and blessed to get to work with a lot of really cool brands. And Z-Man being one of them. I talked about their chatterbait a lot. And when they're sold out, I buy them. So that's my favorite bait for sure. But yeah, I appreciate you letting me come on, man. It was a great time talking with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And if you're ever up in my neck of the woods again, hit me up. I'd love to go fishing with you.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely be back up there. That river is something special.
All right, dude. Well, everyone, I'm going to let Jameson hop off real quick, and because I just have a few things to cover that I didn't cover at the beginning of this. Just wanted to make sure we got him in. But Jameson, if you want to hang out tight after I get done, I'll chat with you. But if you need to go, that's fine, dude. So,
sounds good, man.
All right. Thank you again for coming on. So, all right.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right, guys, real quick, just before we finish up, I wanted to cover the two quick things that I missed at the beginning of the show. We have the Paddle and Fin tournament, the first tournament of the year at Dale Hollow Lake, coming up on April 2nd and 3rd. We will be that's live on Tourney X right now, so you can go sign up if you want. Brian just did a live show earlier tonight highlighting kind of a bunch of questions and answers. You can find that on the Paddle and Fin Facebook page, on YouTube as well. If you have any questions about that, he covered a lot of the questions and answers that we've been getting about that, but make sure you go sign up and check it out. I know a bunch of the Paddle and Fin hosts will be there. I should be there. And I'm looking forward to meeting a bunch of you guys that I've only talked to online or have only been chatting with. So I'm looking forward to meeting a bunch of people in person. I'm also looking forward to fishing down there because it's a beautiful place. I was down there 2 years ago at the Paddle and Fin meetup, and I can't wait to get back down there. So again, check that out on Tourney X and sign up and come fish with us. The last thing I want to talk about is the Paddle and Fin Fantasy Kayak Fishing League that we got going on. If you go to paddleandfin.com/fantasy, you can make your own team. There's prizes. There's both quarterly prizes and end of the year prize for, the kind of the person who has the top points overall. So just go on there, build your team. You can change your team up every week and go against us and the rest of the people. Definitely, my team's kind of still hanging down in the standings, but I'm working my way back up slowly. So definitely check that out, guys. So again, thank you all for listening. This has been the Bass Fishing for Noobs show on the Paddle and Fin podcast, where we bring you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. We'll catch you next time, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode here on Paddle and Fin. Be sure to drop a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, or smash that subscribe button on any platform you're listening in on. Be sure to check us out on Waypoint TV, waypointtv.com. Make sure you sign up for the Fantasy Kayak Fishing League at paddleandfin.com/fantasy. You could support this show through Patreon, patreon.com/paddleandfin. Don't forget to check out the website, paddleandfin.com. Catch us on YouTube. If you got a question, comment, or want to see a future guest on the show, be sure to email us at paddleandfin@gmail.com. Shout out to our show supporters, Yak Gadget. You can check out all the fine kayak accessories at yakgadget.com. Pelican Professional. For all your cases, coolers, and lighting needs, go to pelican.com. Rocktown Adventures, your Midwest premier paddle sports destination. Go to rocktownadventures.com. Eastport Marina, the beautiful destination on Dale Hollow Lake. If you're looking for lodging, kayaks, kayak accessories, or anything fishing related on the beautiful Dale Hollow Lake, go to eastport.info. And Jigmasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com and fill your tackle boxes today.